guests, the Architecture Advisory Committee, and our Planning Commission members. Thank you. And all of our honored community members and consultants and guests, so thank you for coming. I'm here to just give you a little bit of what we've been dealing with tonight on a technological issue. So the good news is we are fully functional in the most odd way, but we are able to have this meeting tonight with a great work from our PCT folks and from Dieter, our IT, and a host of others. But you will not hear me, which you're thankful for right now, coming through these speakers. You will not hear yourself coming through the speakers. The microphones are on. They are fully functioning, so please keep them on. And they will come through for Zoom, and they will be coming through PCT TV as well. So we're fully broadcasting on both PCT as well as Zoom. So bear with us. We will try to speak as loudly as we can. You will hear through the OWL speaker over there any of the Zoom speakers who may speak, and they're mic'd in directly at that point. So the little OWL speaker right there. So don't be startled over with that speaker there. So it'll come in a little loud and a little hot there at some point. So we apologize. We had a brand new amplifier put in on Friday, and it came in and had a fault on it today. So this is what we do, which we just make it work. So thank you, and bear with us, and hopefully the next time we meet, this will be fixed. But thank you again for bearing with us and working with us. We think tonight's going to be a great evening, and so we look forward to it.
Okay, so we're going to get pre-started here. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the September 12th meeting, joint meeting of the Planning Commission and the AAC. We're broadcasting this live, Pacific Coast TV's website, as well as Channel 27. Just a few comments for public comment etiquette. We will have a general public comment section of the meeting that will be community members will be able to speak on any items that are not listed on this evening's agenda. For any specific items listed on the agenda, there will be public comment opportunities during the discussion of those items. 3 minutes are given to those who comment, and in-person comments will follow, will be first and then followed by the attendees on Zoom. Those wanting to speak, please fill out a green speaker card at the entrance and bring it over. And as well as raising your hand on Zoom. If you're on telephone this evening, you can push *6 to raise and unraise your hand and *9 to mute and unmute. We appreciate you all being here, and we apologize for the challenges that we've had this evening. And I will go ahead and turn this meeting over to our acting chair, Ruddick, for this meeting.
Thank you, Bridget. I know the Planning Commission welcomes the members of the Architectural Advisory Committee, Mr. Chad Hooker and Ms. Linda Poncini, to this joint works session. I imagine that we will begin with a presentation on the Streetscape Master Plan from staff and/or...
If we could do the roll call and Pledge of Allegiance first, that would be... And I'm sorry?
And Rick.
And then, yes, I will do Rick's thing as well. So we can start by opening the Pledge of Allegiance and roll call, and then we'll do Rick's thing.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all.
There's a flag somewhere behind there.
And roll call?
Yes. Commissioner, our acting chair Ruddick.
Here.
Commissioner Johannes.
Here.
Commissioner Gorn.
Here.
Commissioner Gossett is absent, and we have Chair Hernandez.
I am present.
And we can hear you. Thank you. We have, Committee Member Poncini.
Here.
And Committee Member Hooker.
Here.
Present. Thank you. I'd like to just take a moment because we do have one of our commissioners is absent, and then one is remote. So Chair Hernandez, I just need to go over a few things with the body that's here and yourself. So Planning Commissioner, for the record, this meeting reflects, Planning Commissioner Hernandez is speaking by Zoom and phone in ordinance with the Brown Act. Each telelocation has been identified and noticed on our agenda, and he is posted at the site that he is located at. I'd like to request that the Commissioner Hernandez respond to the following questions. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Are you able to hear the proceedings up until this moment?
Yes.
Do you have a copy of the agenda at the site?
Yes.
Is your location response reasonably accessible to the public, and as each member of the public can participate in the teleconference at the location that you're located at?
Yes. And I have people who want to come by and participate in the meeting at some point. I hope they're not disruptive.
Is there any member of the public with you currently?
Not officially, no.
Okay. I would now like to ask the commission and the committee body to acknowledge if you can hear Commissioner Hernandez clearly.
I hear him very well.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Hearing that there's no one that has any trouble hearing him, we will record and reflect that the commission and members that are part of this committee can hear him. If there's any reason that he or she cannot be recognized, please clearly acknowledge and let us know. I would like to advise the commission that any votes taken during this teleconference, which we know it's a study session, that it would need to be at a roll call. So we can now proceed with the rest of the meeting. Chair Reddick.
Thank you, Bridget. I see the agenda calls for us to welcome public comment on the streetscape master plan before we go to staff presentation.
General public comment, if anybody has any general first public comment that would like to speak. I'm looking at Zoom as well, and I don't see any. If anybody does, it's okay. If anyone does, please raise your hand or come to the podium. I see none, so you can go ahead and start with the project.
Thank you. Do we have a presentation from staff and the streetscape consultant?
Great, thank you. I'm Karen Decker. I'm Economic and Community Vitality Manager with the City of Half Moon Bay. Can everybody hear me?
Speak up a bit if you can, Karen, please.
Sure, okay. I'm so pleased to say that today kicks off Discovery Week for the Downtown Streetscape Master Plan project. This special meeting is part of a schedule of public meetings this week where the community will be weighing in on all things downtown, from accessibility to vibrancy to enhancements for both residents and visitors. Downtown revitalization has been an interest of the Half Moon Bay City Council and has been an item of discussion at several consecutive annual priority setting workshops. And then this concept was further explored by task force members of the Coastside Recovery Initiative. They identified downtown Half Moon Bay as a business district with great culture and great character, but also untapped potential. They noted the physical design could be improved to increase access and mobility and stimulate more economic activity, both among residents and visitors. This project is also supported by the city's local coastal land use plan, which includes policies for the town center that relate to Main Street and Kelly Avenue and other downtown streets. And this project is included in the city's capital improvement program and is funded for phase 1. Given that, the city released a request for proposals, and I'm happy to say that we received over 10. It was a very competitive bidding process. We underwent 2 rounds of review and conducted interviews with the top 3 firms. I just want to acknowledge Architectural Advisory Committee Linda Poncini, who assisted with that review process. And I'm so pleased that the city is contracting with Tool Design. Tool Design is going to be creating a streetscape master plan. They are a thriving urban design firm specializing in multimodal streetscape design. And I'm pleased to introduce you to Cindy Zerger, Project Manager and Urban Design Lead for Tool Design. And Cindy will be walking us through the program this evening.
Wonderful. Thank you, Karen, and thank you, commissioners and committee members, for the opportunity to be here tonight. We're excited to really engage with you in this conversation. As Karen mentioned, we started out early this morning and have had some really wonderful conversations, and we want to have the opportunity to do that with you. So I'm going to run through a brief presentation, but the majority of our time is going to be spent asking you some questions and getting your feedback. And we are doing this in a hybrid manner, of course, because of the online presence. So work with us as we get our things straightened out here. I think we're pretty ready to roll, though. Just a quick agenda I'd like to share with you. I'm going to talk a little bit about our consultant team, Tool in particular, but then also how we're supported by Opticos Design. And then talk mostly about the project overview, and then really want to, again, hear from you and engage with you in a conversation. Tool Design, as Karen mentioned, we are a firm that really specializes in streetscape design work, and we were so happy to be selected to work on this type of project with the city. We've done this in many communities across the country and certainly here in California, and we've worked with Opticos Design as part of our team before. And I'm going to quickly just introduce you to a couple of our members. They're around the audience here. We have Mitali from Opticos Design. We have Patricia over here, and also Lee from our architectural design firm, an urban design firm. And with us, I also have on the tool design firm, Teresa Demansky, Anju Palta, and Perrin Faulkner here. So fantastic designers representing various different disciplines of design and engineering to really do this work. And we also have Yamabe and Horn, an engineering firm, to support us in some of the site investigations as well. So just a little bit about tool design and our focus. As Karen mentioned, we really focus on streetscape design. We might be the only transportation firm with the word joy in our mission, and we want to make sure we think about our streets as a real asset to communities, and really the space where public life plays out and is an opportunity to really think about it as really the brand of your community. And so you have some wonderful things going for you here, and we're excited to really dive into that. We work on everything from federal guidance to streetscape design and implementation, and this just represents a little bit of our focus. I want to call out the middle document here. Accessible Shared Streets was a FHWA project I worked on and really changed my focus or my understanding of how streets need to function for many people, all ages and all abilities. So thinking through any kind of mobility and sighted impairments are really critical to how we think about our design of our streets. If we can design for them and for those who are dealing with any kind of mobility impairment, we can design for everyone. So that's really been the focus. We are a collection of landscape architects, planners, and urban designers and engineers. And this is just a smattering of the type of work we've had the pleasure of implementing across the country. So really centering bike infrastructure where it's appropriate, walking environments, green infrastructure when we can think about that is as an opportunity to really enhance the experience of a place. And this really sums up our approach to this, that paths can be as designed to be as beautiful as the places to which they lead. And that is really centered in the way we work and work with this team in particular. So excited to be here. And I just wanted to share with you an example of a project that I felt was quite similar to what you're kind of going through here. On the left, you see a before, and on the right, you see the after. A different context, different main street, different cross-section. You can see the same building here is here. And it was a real, very similar process, and we've seen some incredible reinvestment in the downtown in this location. It was a very long main street, and then a destination in its own right, adjacent to a lake, which is a summertime destination, and also has a real distinct rail history in this area. And we stepped through a very similar process to what we're doing here, working through discovery and design workshops there. And then we, through that process, really heard and learned from the community, came up with a vision and a concept design that really, I like to also say about our firm is we love to create creative visions, but that are also implementable and achievable. So there's no greater pleasure to us to see a project built. And so we worked with the community through final design phases for this project as well. And that was, this is the built environment. This features a flush street, which means there's no curbs other than the curb stops that you see on the parking areas, which are right here, these curb stops. It is one that encourages, again, that sort of experience for people with any kind of mobility impairments to easily navigate the community in the streets. It's wonderful for closing for festivals and for different celebrations. This is an aerial view of that same area. Really fun features that we did with Wi-Fi in the community, thinking through music, great seating elements as well, and a real attention to detail in the material palette. And we also consider, again, the public realm is about streets and it's about adjacent spaces. So just wanted to highlight a couple of additional projects as well, thinking through downtown spaces. You have a few of these in the downtown, and how do we think about the public right-of-way and the spaces that you have adjacent to your streets become a cohesive part of your downtown pattern. Oops, excuse me. And just to show you a number of graphics from another project that might be something that we'll step through here, kind of creating the vision plan, talking about the why we're here, kind of the history and the work that we'll be building on. There's been a lot of work that was done before this effort that we have been looking at to inform our approach here, thinking about a streetscape palette and different types of furnishings, again, and creating ways that we can really think of a cohesive downtown streetscape. Just again, some examples of some of the representation graphics that are very helpful, and we work through the real technical things like how an intersection functions, and then we try to talk about the experience as well. So that's a little bit about Tool. And now I'll step into, again, an overview of the master plan process and what we're hoping to achieve. And Karen mentioned this has, again, been building for a number of years, and we have these goals that we're looking to achieve in our process. So creating a more attractive and accessible and economically vibrant downtown, preserving that wonderful historic character that you have, and how do we enhance it as well. Prioritizing improvements not just for visitors, but certainly for people who live here and work here and do business in the downtown area. Leverage, again, that previous work, fantastic work that was done by the San Luis Obispo Urban Design Plan, previous efforts from the COSI Recovery Initiative, and really want to be able to leverage that into what we are doing here. And I think the last but really important piece is to talk about centering community voices and guidance, and that's what this week is really all about. So the overall the graphic on the right is a little washed out, but the overall concept or work is really focused on Main Street from Highway 1 to Highway 1, and a focus on the downtown heritage. I'll show that in more detail in the next slide. We'll develop a set of street design guidelines. We'll be thinking about the adjacent streets too, not just on Main Street, but how do interactions with Kelly and other places in the downtown area really work together. And the design guidelines will include the integration of thinking through wayfinding. How do people know how to navigate and come into the downtown? How we can embed green infrastructure in our approach and in our design. Again, that all ages and abilities focus, and improvements to adjacent public spaces, and of course parking is a part of the conversation as well, and how we're accommodating the needs here. So again, I want to just call out that this is a graphic that this is north here, this is Highway 1 and Main Street, and this is the whole project extents. This is 92 coming down, just so you get to orient yourself. We have a map in front of you as well, should you want to look at that. And then again, this orange isn't showing up super well, but this is the downtown heritage Main Street. And we'll be advancing that work into a level of design that will allow the city to go into construction documentation as well. So project focus area. Our timeline for the project, we are just at the beginning phases. So we're really in existing conditions and visioning, talking with you tonight during our 3-day discovery workshop. We will, again, come back to you at other times during the process. We will ask for to talk with you and meet with you as we have some designs to think or consider. And then, again, as we finalize the documentation and move toward ending our project process. This is about a year's length in process. I will not read this graphic, but just to squint test tells you these are the blue, and the turquoise shows you all of the different engagement periods. So we have a lot of stakeholder interviews. We had a series of them today. And at the same time, our studio, which is at the library and is open for anyone from the public to come on in and hear a little bit more about what we're doing, ask questions, and give us their feedback. Tomorrow, we're really excited for a public workshop at the IDS Center, right off of Main Street, so that's exciting. Hopefully we'll get a lot of folks there. And want to call out that there's also a project website where people can find more information, and certainly that will be a place to look in the future. And now I want to change gears and really hear from you. So we threw up on the screen a map. And we will look at it. We can look at it spatially, with the map that's in front of you. We will also be showing that online for those who are online. And take some notes and hear from you on 3 specific questions, which is what do you like about the downtown, and especially Main Street, and want to see retained? What do you dislike and want to see changed? And what's missing that you would like to see created? These are very broad and open-ended questions, but they help frame the conversation. And so we can certainly take questions from you in terms of our process and what we're doing, but that's largely what we want to do. So we'll take the next amount of time to kind of step through, I think, about 10 minutes or so for each question. And I might pause and see if we need to ask for clarification questions or anything from public comment.
Yeah, I think it makes sense to invite any clarifying questions that we may have. Linda?
Yes, through the chair, I think one question I had as members of the Architectural Advisory Committee or Planning Commission or even City Council, are we allowed to come to these workshops? Or do we have to worry about Brown Act and that type of thing?
I'm going to leave that to city staff to answer.
Yes, you're more than welcome.
All right. And just wondering what the right protocol would be, and I think it'd be interesting for us to observe what the public is saying and what they're getting out of it, not necessarily for us to get all involved in discussions, but I think it would be interesting.
I think the city attorney can shed some light on this.
Yes, thank you. Through the chair, we can provide you with some advice in advance of the meetings if you want to participate, just to provide clarification.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other clarifying questions? I had just one. The stakeholder interviews are with which stakeholders?
That's a great question. So it's with a number of different stakeholders. So there was a lot of work behind the scenes that we've been doing for the last month to really identify key community groups. So everything from faith organizations, school representation, youth organizations, to folks who are very interested in green beautification in the downtown. A very wide-ranging. We cast the net as wide as we can, and then allow them to come in to the session. So we organize. It's a lot of organization of those meetings. So we had a wide range again of youth-focused organizations, faith-based organizations today, and we'll do the same for tomorrow. Mm-hmm.
I trust that the Main Street businesses are represented in that.
Very representative.
Since it's
yes.
all about, well, it's largely about revitalizing Main Street, that makes sense.
That's a great one I didn't mention, but business owners, absolutely, chamber as well.
Of course, good.
Mm-hmm.
So how would you like to proceed to get the input from the committee members and planning commissions on your 3 questions?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I am going to stop sharing, we're going to stop sharing our screen here. And we have Teresa over here who's going to project her screen, but largely you saw those 3 questions that we had up. And so we asked, what do you like and you would like to see retained? What do you dislike and would like to see changed? And what's missing that you would like to see created? And I think it's easiest if we go one question at a time and kind of go around here. And we have Natalie over here who's going to be taking some notes. We're going to be taking it online as well. And it looks like we're in that process right now. So let's just wait until the screen is up here, I think.
Sure. I'm sorry, so the intent is to see the notes?
Yeah, that's
On the
right.
screen.
Since we wanted to be able to project, since we're kind of have a hybrid and there might be some people attending online. So that's, oh, here it goes, yay.
Great.
We are nearly there. So this is a whiteboard application that we often use for online collaboration and engagement. So what you see here are the 3 questions again. And we'll be taking Post-it notes, but we're also taking them up there. So what you're saying is going to be recorded in multiple places. So let's start with that first questions and maybe go around as, if we can, with what do you like and want to see retained?
Okay. Would our AAC members like to start off with what you like about
Sure.
Main Street?
I can do that. Thank you. I think one of the things that is wonderful about downtown are the mature trees along the street. And so I think it's going to be very important to respect those and find ways to protect them with all the types of things that will be done, required from civil engineering and power and drainage and accessibility, working on the sidewalks. I mean, those trees could really be in danger of failing. And I think that's incredibly important. And so I think it's going to take a lot of creativity from the design team and the engineers to see how those trees can be saved. The beginning of some of the parklets that have been done in the last few years, a couple of years. I think that's really great, and people certainly like that. And that leads into having outdoor seating and dining and places where people can just sit and relax, because there can be, especially on weekends, a lot of people walking up and down the streets, and they do need places to sit and just enjoy. Another thing I like a lot that has begun are the murals. There were some older murals that were there. The new ones are stunning, and I think that adds a lot to it. Architecturally, I like the fact that as much as possible, people are trying to maintain and bring back the quality of some of the older buildings. And so I think that will be an interesting challenge to see how that can be done and how that gets funded, because there are a lot of business people and building owners that probably can't afford to do huge renovations. there was a project that I was involved in, Mountain View, where there was something set up, and this was many, many, many years ago, where there was a certain amount of money that was provided. It wasn't a lot, $2,000 here or there, for businesses to be able to upgrade their buildings or to at least do a facial uplift on them through grants and that type of thing. So that would be to encourage that people can keep improving their older buildings that are there.
Great, thank you.
I concur with a number of the things Linda said, most importantly about the trees. Some years ago, my wife and I went on vacation and came back, and while we've been gone, all the trees on Main Street have been cut down. And it was pretty stark. In addition to that, the new trees were planted without root barriers, for which the city appears to have no policy, and without irrigation, for which the city appears to have no money. So the trees that are there now have been disrupting the sidewalks. Sidewalks are too narrow as it is, so it'd be, as Linda said, very nice to keep those trees. At the same time, it may prove that many of them are not in ideal locations. Another thing I really like about the old downtown heritage district, I guess you call it, is the older buildings, and I would like to see policies to help support the renovation of those buildings. There's been some very interesting work done in San Mateo around B Street based on the city partnering with developers or building owners, where the city takes on streetscape, curb, gutter, sidewalk, all the things that presently get loaded onto a building owner or contractor to take care of when buildings are renovated, and the cost of doing that frequently discourages improvements. And we've got buildings that have been sitting vacant on Main Street for a very long time and degrading as they go. I don't have a lot of other comments in addition to what Linda said in terms of favorable things downtown, favorable present features.
Well, thank you, Linda and Chad. Would David, would you like to go next?
Well, so I'm an editor, so I can tell you what's wrong with everything really well. But I would say I really like how walkable the downtown is. And I think that the parklets have helped a lot with that. It kind of gives a feeling of, I don't know, sort of it's peaceful and friendly. And that's a good direction.
Thanks. Commissioner Johannes?
I like the small town feel. That's what I like. I like the small town feel of Half Moon Bays downtown.
Great, awesome.
Well said. At the top of my list also would be the small-town character of Main Street. I mean, this is a place where, you know, at the central intersection of town, we have City Hall, the local newspaper, the oldest grocery store on the coast, and MacDutra Park, where you very often see your neighbors having coffee and conversation. And I think that is incredibly unique and special asset for our town. If I could choose one thing for us to preserve and not screw up going forward, that would be it. That's that small town character. It is so different from walking around Redwood City, or I won't name any other ones, but not that those are unpleasant places, but I very vividly appreciate what we have there. I like the fact that we have been recently open to parklets and other gathering spots, sidewalk tables, MacDutra Park I mentioned. I very much like the focus we have on local artists and public art with the murals. I believe and hope that we can do even more in that space. I mentioned not long ago at a Planning Commission meeting that my partner Susan is from Eastern Washington State, and she loves to brag about a town called Toppenish in Washington, which has turned itself into the mural capital of the Northwest. I think they have 75 public murals devoted to their agricultural and pioneer history, and maybe there is much more that Half Moon Bay could do in a positive sense in that way. I like the fact that we are being more active about mixed use in downtown. We're looking at projects that are bringing residential into downtown. I think that's key to the vibrancy of Main Street. I like the fact that there is a fair amount of parking off of Main Street, even though not everybody knows about it. Vice Chair Gossett shared at a Planning Commission meeting not long ago when we were considering the College of San Mateo application that she'd done a survey in the middle of the day and identified, I think, 40-plus empty parking places on Church Street, 2 blocks from Main. I think there's a lot of hidden potential there that would allow us to do big things with Main Street if we can harness the potential of that parking.
And we forgot about Rick.
Yes, I'm sorry. I forgot about Chair Hernandez. So I'll wrap it up and invite him to weigh in. Thank you for that.
Thank you, Steve, and everybody. And by the way, greetings from the Gaylord Hotel in Nashville, Tennessee. I am at the Parcel Forum. This is what I do for a living. What do I like and we want to see retained in our town? So it's not just what I want. We went through a very long public process where we collected feedback from the community very recently, where, they said, we want to preserve our small town character, which is similar to comments that my colleagues here have made. We want to protect the open space. We want to make our community more walkable. And these things already exist in the downtown area. And, we have a very good foundation. So it's extremely walkable from Main Street Bridge to the south end of town. And we have really interesting buildings, some of which are in a good state, some of which, like the Oddfellow building, could potentially be restored to its original grandeur. So there's opportunities for improvement, but we have some really interesting buildings that we want to protect and preserve and grow. And one of the most iconic things about Main Street when you're heading south towards Santa Cruz from Highway 92 is the iconic views of the Santa Cruz Mountains in the background. So we want to make sure that we can enhance those views, we can appreciate those views, and just protect them. And I agree with what Linda Pontini said about the murals. I think they're fantastic. They're lovely, and we want more of them. But the thing that absolutely stands out about our town on a Saturday or a Sunday, especially early in the morning, is a sense of community that you have. When you start at the Half Moon Bay Coffee Shop, north of the Main Street Bridge, you see people gathered there outside with their pets, drinking coffee, having conversation. You see people inside. You see people at Tom and Pete's Produce buying stuff. You see Barterra, maybe not early in the morning, but there's a place where people can sit. You see Mac Dutra Park, where a very different group of people than who were in the Half Moon Bay Coffee Shop are gathered and playing cards and hanging out. And later in the day, you have not just Barterra, you have Sacrilege, where you have these parklets where people gather and you have this sense of community. And if we can protect that, enhance it, and make it better, to me, I think most people here would say that would be a home run. And so those are the things that I think are most important to me.
Thank you, Chair Hernandez.
Great.
I would like to
Yeah.
add something.
Sure, please.
And that is the character of the Main Street Bridge. There's a lot of talk about all those structural problems that has possibly had and the likelihood of its renovation or replacement. And I'd hate to see it replaced with some contemporary Caltrans-looking bridge because that's an off-the-shelf design. That happened in our town when they built the post office, and I think it's a tragic building. I wouldn't want to see that happen to Main Street.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. I think those are all really good. You're calling out a lot of the themes that we heard today. Great, what we would call great bones in the downtown. You've got a really walkable community and wonderful assets to really leverage as we think about the design. We'll have to be creative as we think about trees and different things like facade treatments and programs that way. I want to change and shift the conversation to the things we maybe don't like and want to see changed. And I want to just also mention, we are looking at the heritage, of course, downtown Main Street, and also out to the one on both sides. So as things come up that you're thinking about not liking, think about that whole area and how that functions for you. So, great. Same.
Linda, would you like to lead off again?
Here we go. All right.
She's got a list.
I have a short list. My largest pet peeve about downtown is when the parking was changed to the angled parking. And now that cars, trucks, vans, SUVs are longer and bigger, and they don't fit anymore. And you try to drive down Main Street, when there's a big truck on one side and an SUV on the other side, you have to go into the other lane. I'm just waiting for some disaster to happen. It's also very difficult for people to back out and not hit a pedestrian, somebody with their kid and their dog. I think at least in those main 4 blocks of the historic part of Main Street, we need to look very hard at getting rid of the cars. And I think, as was mentioned, that there are places 1 block away. There's more available parking on Prisma and on other side, sorry, Johnston Street, and then on some of the side streets. So I think that really needs to be looked at. We've seen in, again, other cities in the Bay Area where that has been really pushed, and it works. With the fact that downtown is so walkable, it's very easy. And I think that's essential. I think also the thing that's difficult now are that, as Chad mentioned, the sidewalks have been really damaged by tree roots and inconsistent quality of the concrete and such, that it's difficult to negotiate the sidewalks. Sidewalks are very narrow. Some of the floor levels of the shops downtown are, 12 inches, close to 12 inches above the sidewalk, and very steep ramps going in. So there's huge issues with accessibility. And I think that solving that whole problem between the parking, the accessibility, the comfort of people walking back and forth, larger, wider sidewalks, or a total pedestrian zone, that if, and then on top of that, saving the trees. And I think that's, for me, that's the biggest problem. I think otherwise, I think downtown functions quite well in terms of a good social space. And that's, I think if that gets solved, it's going to be much nicer, for sure.
Anything that you're thinking about for outside of the downtown heritage area? Anything that comes to mind in terms of changes or things? You can also mention things you like, too.
Well, I think there's quite a character change when you get past Correas. There are some very nice character buildings there, mostly former residential buildings that make nice little shops and art galleries and such. And so I guess, I'm not saying I don't like it, that it changes, but maybe there needs to be some thought given to how you transition to a different style of architecture. How do you introduce elements that might integrate things better? But I think that the mixture, I don't mind the mixture of things that happens. I think that helps everything feel really good. I think because the parking, to me, just overwhelms everything, and the situation with it, I think it'll be a challenge to solve that, and if that can get solved, then other minor things can be taken care of, I think. It's my personal opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you. Committee Member Hooker?
Again, Linda has mentioned some things that are of concern to me. I think the sidewalks are far too narrow, and the tree wells do encroach on those. If you make the sidewalks wider by going to parallel parking, then the trees are in the middle of the sidewalk. So then you cut down the trees, and we're back where we were 30 years ago with no trees on Main Street. That's unfortunate. I also think that the city, there just aren't enough places to actually just sit down and stop walking around. There is, once again, there's no bench policy downtown. I was told about 2 years ago when a friend of mine passed, I wanted to put a memorial bench for him, and I was told that no memorial benches could be added to the Coastside Trail because there was some theory that it would wash away in the next 25 years. And then the second thing is that there's no policy for benches downtown. So it's made me want to build them a bench and just put it there. I don't know where, but somewhere. I think it'd be nice to have more benches in more areas, not necessarily full-scale parks, but places to sit down. And crosswalks is another item. A good example of that is just before, as you're headed north on Main Street, just before you get to the Zabala House, in that vicinity, a lot of people cross the street there, but there's no crosswalk. The only crosswalks we have, with the exception of the one that's been recently added in front of Petite Pauline, is really at intersections. Yeah. Try not to get me started on what I whine about. So.
You can come in.
Now's your chance.
You can whine all you want.
Something will
right?
hit you again tomorrow. Feel free to come in.
I'll think some more about the areas away from Main Street as well.
Thanks.
Let me invite Chair Hernandez to comment since I forgot him in the first round.
Well, you didn't forget me. I just went a little later, but I appreciate that. Linda Poncini, I think, has been very diplomatic in how she's talked about things. I'll be a little less diplomatic. When you pass the sign that says Half Moon Bay and has our population on it, the experience, it's kind of interesting. You know, you go to Lemos Farm, you see the amusement parks. It's very cute, it's very quaint. Set aside the traffic concerns for Lemos Farm, you get this vibe of Half Moon Bay. And then you get to that Half Moon Bay sign when you actually enter the city limits, and it's trashy. We have some interesting things. We have the Oddfellows Cemetery with the tree grove, which looks amazing. We have some lovely Monterey cypress trees in the Spanish town. But overall, it feels trashy. And you get to Main Street, and it feels trashy. There's some interesting buildings. There's some improvements. The Shell gas station is a big improvement over where it used to be. The new building that has been put up, that is the real estate firm that near the twice as nice parking lot. That's a very nice building, but it feels trashy. And there's nothing that tells people you are in downtown Half Moon Bay when you hit the intersection of Main Street and Highway 92. There's no arch like you have in Modesto or Pleasanton or Redwood City that says this is where you're at. There's nothing to tell you clearly where the downtown is. And if you, to the right, hey, that's a commercial district, that's okay. Like it's a little different. But if you, as you go into historic Highway 1, historic Half Moon Bay, there's nothing to invite you to go there. It looks awful until you get to the Main Street Bridge. And the Main Street Bridge is an interesting, has potential to be restored to whatever its former glory might have been, but it looks trashy. It's broken down, it's got chipped paint, nobody wants to touch it for many reasons we won't go into here, but it does not feel like this is someplace you want to be. And when you go across Main Street Bridge, you see all these very long trucks that are parked at an angle, and it's hard to see. It detracts from the sense of community. It detracts from the sense of walkability. It obstructs the view. It's a hazard, quite frankly. And it doesn't feel nice. You contrast this to Burlingame Avenue, where I think they've done a really good job. And we're not Burlingame, we're Half Moon Bay. We're a farm town by the beach next to the Silicon Valley. We got to lean into that, right? But we can make it less trashy. And I think that's, I want to make it inviting and like a place where people want to come and walk. And right now, we don't invite you to do that visually. There's nothing that says this is a place where you should really be walking. This says this is a place where you should park your big truck or your little car and jump in and jump out. I do think it is walkable. I walk up and down, I run, I bike, I spend a lot of time here, but it's not safe as a biker. If you look at the sidewalks from Safeway to the south end of town, you can't ride a bike or go on a wheelchair or go on a walker without having to move to the left, move to the right, move to the left, move to the right, because there's no integrated feeling. We've got trees planted on one side, we've got street signs on the other. You can't navigate this if you have any kind of walking impediment. It's terrible. And for those of you who don't have kids in the high school or haven't had kids in the high school very recently, Lewis Foster Drive is a train wreck. It is a hot mess on a school day for lots of reasons. And at lunchtime, it's a hot mess. And my daughter just graduated from Half Moon Bay High. We have lots of friends and kids who go there. Those kids can tell you what a hot mess that whole intersection is. When people are coming down at lunchtime, they're trying to get to New Leaf, they're trying to get to the new sandwich shop, they want to go spend money, but it's not safe. And it's a hazard, and it's ugly. That is a hot mess that needs to be fixed. Yeah. Those are my thoughts.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Hernandez. Commissioner Gorn, would you like to go?
Rick, I think you must be part editor. I had a couple of things. I would say the encouraging new ways to get into downtown, particularly with bikes, and there is no bike parking. And there's not really bike paths. It's not safe, as he says. And encouraging everyone to park on the side streets. And if that means closing the street, that's not a bad idea. I would go for that. I know that the shop owners are terrified of doing that. They don't want to lose parking right in front of their places, but truthfully, their business will increase if you get more people parking and more people walking and using their place. I think the transition that you talked about, Linda Pancini talked about, around Correas, I think that's actually really an important spot for some kind of public space. I think that could be a transition point for sort of incorporating that next area into downtown, because right now it doesn't feel that way. I would say the entrance to Half Moon Bay is the one thing that I was going to bring up, and Rick is so spot on. And at first I thought, right where the bridge is, that's where I think of as the opening to downtown. And I thought that sort of how the bridge is designed and how the entrance to downtown is designed at that point is really vital. But I would also say I hadn't really thought about when you come down 92 or when you make the little shortcut onto Main Street from the north part of 1, you're greeted with that intersection that doesn't tell you anything and is really trashy. And so I think that those two spots are actually really important. The parklets help a lot. And so when I think of that transitional spot and having some public space, I think that sort of having parklets that transition into public space that transitions into parklets, with maybe not such a linear design that we currently have, I think would help a lot. I think that's mostly it. I would also echo the high school intersection is impossible. And it actually makes Highway 1 impossible because no one can travel on Highway 1 at that point because everyone's backed up trying to get to the high school. So, small.
Thank you. Commissioner Johannes?
I think everything I was thinking about has been covered. It's not very much. I walk everywhere. I walk to the harbor. I walk to Rocket Farms. I walk to, along the coast, all the way down to, the Johnson House, all the way down to the Ritz. I mean, I just walk. I'm a walker. I rarely walk downtown. And that says something to me. And I don't know if it's because I'm a person that likes more of the environment, but I very rarely walk downtown. If I walk downtown, I'm there only for a specific purpose, and then I leave. But when I do walk downtown, I actually like it, but I agree that there's no identity. That's what I'm trying to say. I don't know if Half Moon Bay has its identity completely captured yet. It's hard for me to say, I have visitors that come from out of the country all the time, and they love this town. Not a problem. They say how quaint, how lovely, how beautiful, how lucky I am to live here, and I say yes. But when you listen to a lot of what the people that live here want, they want more of the downtown, right? So a lot of people come here from small towns in Ireland that love our downtown, right? But there is a lack of transition between Highway 92 and Main Street. And I'm not sure if an archway is the right answer. I don't know. We've had, I think there were some kind of banner poles that were put at one point to address such an issue on either side, I think by the coffee shop before, I think, the bridge. That was supposed to have banners, interchangeable banners that were supposed to be used frequently to introduce down as you were entering to downtown for whatever festivities they were. And, it was supposed to, at that time, I think many folks thought it was going to be, a beautification effort it was at that point in time. So I don't know why we're not maybe try to use that's already existing into that area. So there is no transition between 92 and Main Street, and it is unsafe. The angled parking is a problem because I've almost seen bicyclists been almost in a hit type of a situation. So that does need to be improved. So, I mean, a lot of what has already been said is all true, but like I said, I kind of like walking downtown. So, you know, when I do, you know, but it does need some kind of beautification, and it feels like it doesn't have an identity. It doesn't tell us that we have history. We have Native American history here. We have, you know, Portuguese, Italian. We have the Mexican American. You know, it doesn't speak to all the different cultures. And I think one of the things that came out of what Rick had mentioned was that, you know, people wanted to see our culture. And so there's a lot of culture that I don't see going downtown. Thanks.
Thank you. I think that this is potentially a great project. You know, the chance to reimagine downtown doesn't come along every year, and I take it as a challenge for all of us to think big about this. So, thank you. So, when I reimagine Heritage Main Street, I imagine no cars on it, and parklets and wider sidewalks, and a parking structure somewhere near Main Street. The joy that I get from the unique character when I walk there sometimes evaporates on a busy weekend with all of the cars and all of the traffic and all of the problems with the not really appropriate parking spaces there. You know, most of us, I think, know Jules Sofer, who owned the bookstore on Main Street for many years. He often used to speak articulately about the goal of getting businesses to chip in for this parking structure, and now is the time for us to think big and think about that. I think that stretch of Heritage Main Street could be one of the world's greatest pedestrian streets if we took up that challenge. And as Commissioner Gorn pointed out, it's natural for some people to hear that and say, well, how will people get to my shop or my store if they can't park exactly in front of it? But, you know, every year goes by, there is more and more real data about the economic benefit to retail in cases like this. Since I've been on the Planning Commission for 4 years and a bit, I've seen 3 presentations from cities who have done this and have been glad that they banned cars from certain stretches and invested in parklets to bring people in and shop more in those places. And you see it in our neighboring cities. I mean, Palo Alto and San Carlos and Mountain View are all going in this direction. So that's my one dislike, is the way that the parking and vehicle madness on busy weekends tends to eat into and erode the charm that the city has. My other thing, I'm going to be repetitive of earlier speakers, but Half Moon Bay does not have the gateways that it deserves and needs. I mean, we are, whether you're coming for south on 1 or north on 1 or west on Highway 92, I mean, God, we are starving for some thematic consistency and welcoming and wayfinding. You know, it was pointed out to us earlier this year by some of the Main Street merchants that they talk to customers, and a lot of them have been coming to the coast for many years and never knew that Heritage Main Street existed. You know, they were heading for the beach and maybe they stopped at 7-Eleven, but we could do so much better than that. And we could do 100 times better than the current reality.
Yeah.
And I echo the feeling that when I leave Main Street and I go north across the bridge, I feel like I've left Half Moon Bay and I've entered some other place. And as I approach the intersection of Highway 92 and Main Street, I have to admit, I'm often filled with dread over my bad experiences over the last 30 years there. And and when you cross 92 and you continue north towards 1, the road up to the high school is often a mess. There's a place just south of that where 4 driveways converge into Main Street from the hardware store and the industrial park, and it's a challenge. I mean, it's a video game getting through there sometimes. Thank you for the chance to vent on that.
No, that was great. Again, I think there's.
Through the chair.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, Chair Hernandez.
I just wanted to really reiterate that point you just made. I mean, I'm in a conference here, and I've literally talked to a few hundred people today individually, and so many people are like, "Oh, it's in Half Moon Bay. It's beautiful." And so many people don't know there is a downtown Half Moon Bay. Mm-hmm. Like, it's unbelievable. They just don't even know it exists. And it kills me that we can't get people to park near the downtown and go walk around and enjoy our businesses and enjoy that sense of community. It kills me. Because I do walk to the farmers market on the weekends. We've made that part of our mission as a family to do that thing. And, you know, there's such a missed opportunity because nobody knows, many people don't know that the downtown exists. We get millions of people visiting the coast side every year, and the majority of them don't know about downtown Half Moon Bay. We gotta figure out how to fix that.
Thank you. Oh, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I think there's a great transition there around, you talked a little bit about identity and how critical that is, the downtown. The next question is really focused on what's missing that you would like to see added. And I think that can be as tangible as a parking garage or better lighting, or as intangible as identity or kind of cohesiveness. So I want to open it up again for conversation. We've heard a lot of great, what's missing that we'd like to see created already, but if there's additional things you want to add, please, go for it.
Okay. Linda, are you willing?
You start this time.
I'll start. I think that one of the principal things that feels to me that's missing from Half Moon Bay is this sense of some sort of a theme, that it's some kind of a place that there's a focus. People think about pumpkins and the Pumpkin Festival, but I'd just like to give you an example that I'm familiar with, vaguely familiar with. A brother of mine lives in upstate Vermont. He snow skis about a half an hour away from his home in a one-horse town called East Burke. And there's one mountain there, great place to ski. In the summertime, you could shoot a gun off on Main Street and nobody would know it. Mm. So then an outfit called Kingdom Trails was established there that makes deals with the farmers that own the property all around there. And they build bike trails across the farmer's property. They've got one master, liability release kind of a form, and the farmers aren't held responsible for anything, but they build these bike trails on private property and connect one town to the next and make for hundreds of miles of biking around Burke. Now, the town is full of bike shops, bed and breakfasts. Where the creek meanders away from the highway, there's a big flat that has a bunch of little cabins in it, and one guy tends 10 cabins, and people come up from Boston and bike all over the place. And bikes are for real now. Many people don't ride them, but an awful lot of people do. Now let's come back to where we are. If you're in Pacifica and you know exactly where to go, you can figure out how to get on the old Pedro Mountain Road, which is a train wreck, almost vertical train wreck. Very dangerous to ride, but you can come down into the back of Montera. And if you know exactly how to do it, you can get yourself to North Moss Beach without getting on the highway. Then you're on the east side of the highway in Moss Beach, where there is only one crosswalk. And you take your life in your hands to cross the road there. When you get across the road, there's nowhere to ride a bike. You're in a residential neighborhood. Then you can figure out a way to get down as far as Airport Boulevard, where people go past you at about 70 miles an hour in motorhomes. You wind up in Princeton. You can ride on the Coast Side Trail until you get to Half Moon Bay, where e-bikes are prohibited. on the Coast Side Trail. If you're on the other side of the highway coming out of El Granada, the bike trail is not complete. Once you get to the south end of Half Moon Bay, you're done. The idea that you can ride from Pacifica to Santa Cruz without getting on the highway is seen as an absurdity, and I don't know why. There's a lot of old Coast Highway sections between here and Santa Cruz, and there's all this open farmland, and there's an old railroad road bed. There's, you know, if Half Moon Bay had a bicycle identity, it would draw people from all over the Bay Area every day, as well as on weekends in the summer, to ride bikes. The hillsides are beautiful, but most of them are fenced off and closed. You can't get there from here. You can't get here from there. So you wind up back on the highway again. So that's an example. And I could come up with specific information about Kingdom Trails and Burke Mountain and some lawyers and so on if there's somebody who wants to talk about that. I think this ties into the idea that there doesn't appear to be a master plan or a theme or a goal that would draw people to town. I also would second the comments about you get to 92 in Maine, you don't know where you are. And lots of people have thought that the pumpkin farms out on 92 are Half Moon Bay, or that is the pumpkin festival. They don't know we're here. There is another problem, and that is the overlaid and increasingly intense process of approvals, the regulatory obstructions that prevent or delay almost everything. The idea that a very good proposal behind which many people stand still takes at least 2 years of talking and hobnobbing and having meetings and redesigning and back and forth and round and round and round, because no one will commit to actually getting something done. The process trumps accomplishment. And frankly, I will be stunned if anything that you come up with actually gets built in our Main Street in less than a decade. I'll be stunned. I may not live that long, but from here I'll be stunned. I don't know what can be done about that permit construction process. It's so overlaid and so intense. There's all this talk now about the section of Main Street from 92 to Highway 1, but there was a very good plan for a bypass that would have gotten people from the North Coast to not have to go through the middle of town. Somebody got elected, became mayor, and changed all of that, and changed in a way that it can never be brought back. So the bypass is gone forever, and we're stuck with the traffic nightmare. I don't know, I'm not a traffic engineer, but I do know that something needs to be made a little bit better than it is over there. I could go on and on. I won't.
Thank you for that. Committee Member Pansini?
Well, this is a small detail, and when I was listening to the first meeting that you had with the City Council, Vice Mayor Jimenez had a really great idea to be sure that every building that deserves one has a plaque. And I started paying attention to that the last time I was downtown and having coffee and whatnot. And some of the older buildings do have plaques. Mm-hmm. When they were built, and there's an interesting one on the bakery that has a list of who owned it and when they owned it. And it's just heartwarming. It's really nice. And there are some plaques that are bronze and they're very fancy looking. But even the ones that are simple and handmade and gives character, and it shows where we came from, where we might be going, or how things have changed, and who used to, I'd love that idea of who used to own this and who owns it now. And so I thought that was such a great idea that he came up with, and that's a simple thing. That would be a very simple thing to start doing. And so there may be some other things that could be done on a smaller scale that could start implementing, because I share Chad's concern that it's going to take forever. And especially when you get into all the utilities and the re-engineering the sidewalks and the street, and it's going to be awful. But if there could maybe be identified some elements that could be changed, Just the simplicity of the flower baskets that are hanging all the time now. I mean, that started, I don't know how long ago, maybe 10 years ago they started that. But before that, it wasn't there. And it's a beautiful thing to have, and someone does really take care of those and keep it going. I was really struck the last time that I was in Carmel that there are little planters everywhere and they aren't just like low water use plants, they're giant flowers. It looks like something that you would have inside your house. It was gorgeous. And yes, they do encroach on the sidewalk, but they're beautiful. And you just have this different feeling there. And I know there's always been this, heaven forbid that the caramelization of Half Moon Bay, right? But that aspect is very nice. And it's something fairly simple, The merchant can put it out there. So maybe there's things like that that can be done while the big plan is working its way through the system, and things that make the character of either the building or the shop and such. Harpo's chair out in front of Cafe Society, and things that are personal. And I think that's a really nice thing. And as more places to sit and take it easy are introduced, then we can have some of those smaller things which are going to make nice little pauses for people.
Thank you. Who would like to comment? David?
So I just have one thing, and that's when you talked about identity, and like our Half Moon Bay is a farming and fishing community historically, and we do have a really great farmers market, but it's over at Shoreline, and the locals like it, and that's great. But I wondered if there might be an element downtown that is for farmers and fishmongers. We don't have anything for fishmongers. That is sort of a public space where you might have something like a farmer's market, a fish market on a regular basis. I think it's very attractive. I think it sort of invites people to walk and mingle and everything else. And I think it would be profitable as well. So that's mine.
Thank you. Commissioner Johannes?
I agree with your comment.
I got one.
Because I do feel we're not sure for coastal, ag, farming, surfer, because, when I travel, and I travel a lot for work as well, people know Half Moon Bay for a couple of things. Beautiful, coastal, bluff tops, love the coastal trail is what they say. They love the sunflowers in the farms. They love artichokes. They sometimes get confused with the Watsonville in here. And they talk about the Ritz-Carlton. And they know Mavericks. No matter where I go, anywhere across the nation, they know Mavericks. So how can we capitalize on using all of these themes? Because I'm not too sure for an ag community. I mean, I traveled in the Salinas Valley. That's an ag community. But we are a coastal. I mean, I was trying to reason this out. So we are coastal, and we are farming. We also have this wonderful Mavericks, and trying to get that incorporated into our downtown might be something. I've always thought that we could have an environmental center as well downtown where people could visit and the farmers could showcase how they grow their crops, and maybe they could, have it's a little bit of I don't want to call it a museum, but a show and tell. Maybe they could, maybe we could invite a farm to table sessions on how you can use some kind of, vegetable that a lot of people don't know how to use. Maybe they can have little training sessions. It's just not a museum, but I guess it's a lab or something to that effect. We can showcase our coastal environment, you know, and then how we tend to want to make sure that we restore our bluff tops. We want to make sure that we don't have, you know, we want to restore, actually showcase our mountains. Something that is more environmental theme, tied into Mavericks, tied into farming, tied into the different groups of people that settled here. It's just something that brings that together. So anyway, I'm just trying to figure out what that identity would be. So.
Thank you. Chair Hernandez?
I feel a lump in my throat as I listen to my colleagues talk about our community. I love it. And like Commissioner Joannis, I travel a lot, and people always tell me how beautiful Half Moon Bay is, and I feel it's very special. So I don't know what the right answer is in terms of what do I want to see. I mean, we've got farm, fish, surf, country, technology, culture, art. These are all things that represent Half Moon Bay to me. I can hand over heart say, I live in a farm town, right? Our high school teaches ag science in a meaningful way. We're considered a rural school from the UC's perspective. We have a vibrant farming community. We have historic Highway 1 that runs through Main Street. We've got the California Coastal Trail, which is not a monolithic thing, but a collection of trails that go back to the Coastanoans and the other native peoples who live in California. And, you know, we need to lean into that. And I don't know the best way to represent that. I mean, do we want to be bikes, beer, barns, and beaches? I don't know. I mean, that may not be what we want, but there's a lot that we can lean into that's already here. And this is the tricky part, which is how do you pull together that astonishing sense of community that we have? I mean, honestly, the golf that we have at the Ritz-Carlton is world class. The draw for people to spend the night in Half Moon Bay is world class. Many different properties up and down the coast. And, you know, I think the coastal trail is an element that really ties our community together. Not just Half Moon Bay, but the greater Half Moon Bay, the El Granada, Montera, and Commissioner Gorn's comment about how hard it is to bike contiguously from Montera to Pescadero, and then the parts that are really in the city and the areas that are focused on it needs to be addressed. I mean, I think that thinking about that system of trails that have existed here for thousands of years and how we tie that together, there's a lot of potential in that. Some obvious, really simple things that need to be fixed. Kitty Fernandez Park is trashy. Going back to the theme of trashy. It's a huge opportunity on the south end of town where we can do something interesting there. And I know a lot of people are thinking about that. That intersection of right next to Kitty Fernandez Park, next to Main Street, super dangerous, needs to be addressed. And there's a lot of potential on the south. I mean, the south end of Main Street has a lot of potential. And we have some sacrilege, the Playhouse. There are interesting things that we can make it easy to connect these things together. we're not too far away from having a really thriving Main Street from one end of town to the other. So I do want to see something that brings that character, that tells that story of who we are as a community. And maybe it's the murals. I mean, I do think that the lovely murals we have are great, and I know there's work, Parks and Rec, to put more murals in town. I think we need to lean into that. And maybe think about some of the private property that abuts Highway 92. How do we work with the property owners there to invite people to pause? Because I think that word came up earlier. This is a place to pause, to just have a place to sit, to have a place to gather where you can just slow down. That is one of the most beautiful things about our community, is that sense of getting to a slower pace. And maybe that's what we lean into. But I like the idea of having more benches, having places to sit, having more of these parklets. Those are things that I think there's a real opportunity to lean into, and making downtown Half Moon Bay a place where you want to pause. Even the Safeway parking lot, turning that into a place to pause. The Lewis Foster Drive, Poplar Street as it connects to Main, all those big feeder streets that hit Main Street. Let's make that a place where you park your car and walk. It feels overwhelming sometimes. We want to drive everywhere, but if you've been to New York City, like, it's, you walk everywhere. And you spend a lot of money in that downtown in Manhattan and places like that. I mean, I think we can get people to get out of their car and pause. I think that's a home run.
Thank you, Chair Hernandez. You know, I'm sitting here listening to this fascinating discussion of Half Moon Bay's identity, and I was looking at the podium with the city seal on the front of it, in which we see the ocean and the farm fields and the forest. So I think that's pretty cool. I mean, that's been an expression of that identity for some decades now. I don't have much more to add on what I think is missing. As I said, I think pedestrian streets are missing. I'd love to see a couple of blocks of pedestrian streets with fantastic parklets. I'd like to see a parking structure or some similar solution to replacing that parking. I'd love to see 3 gateways at the entrances to our town. I think there's so much we could do there. And I'll give you one tiny little specific to consider. Do you know the story of the street signs in San Luis Obispo? Well, some years ago, the city of San Luis Obispo decided they were going to redo all their street signs in a distinctive and fun and welcoming way. I sent Karen an image of this the other day, but check it out if you can. A local designer helped them with that, came up with a font or helped them choose a font called Libra, which some people refer to as a Hobbit font, and not everyone likes it. So I'm not recommending that font, but I think it would show a cool attention to detail and welcoming spirit if the city ends up with some kind of a signage like that could be on all of our downtown streets. Thank you, that's all I have.
So no gum walls, huh?
No, especially not. That's disgusting.
Well, they have some in San Luis.
Yes, I've walked by it.
How does Tool Design proceed with a Main Street beautification project when the conversation goes from Pacifica to Santa Cruz to halfway up 92? And
Yeah, it's no small challenge, is it?
This has turned into a conversation about the feel of the town rather than the feel of Main Street alone.
Well, I think that's really important, though, the feel of the overall town, and how can we express that through everything from the fonts that we choose on different elements to the material palette that we select. How can we express some of these layers of history that you've talked about. I think that's a really interesting thing, as I'm hearing, and I know from some of our research and being here myself, how layered your history is. And I think that's it's really actually helpful as a designer to have something to that people are talking about, not just we're seeing, but we're hearing this in many different conversations, and the depth of kind of pride that you all have and the community has and what we heard in the conversations today is just fantastic. And I think it is, it's going to be a challenge for us to come up with a cohesive idea and express that, but I think it's better than the inverse, right, where we're not really sure what we're sort of talking about and how to make it a wonderful place. You have some great identity pieces that I think we can tease out and bring along all of Main Street in different ways, and perhaps onto some of the adjacent perpendicular streets, that really makes it cohesive. So thank you for your time and for the walking through this process with us and the brainstorm. That's really where we're at right now, is brainstorming, and it's about casting, again, that wide net, and then we'll come up with sort of how we think that's going to manifest itself in a physical space. So I'm not sure exactly what it'll look like, but I'm excited to get there with the community. So I think that's it. Okay.
Director
Through the
Egas.
chair. Yeah, thank you. Through the chair, we just want to double check to see if we have anyone here for public comment at this point on this item. We haven't seen any hands up, but oh, there you are. Okay, excellent. You can go ahead and speak at the microphone at the podium, please. Thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity. Yeah, just to echo a lot of what's been said, Commissioner Joannis, really liked what you said about representing the layers of history. But yeah, it's pretty interesting. It feels like the first step is to define kind of the identity of the mission statement for the city and get this through line, whether it's going to go through Half Moon Bay or all the way up and down the coast. So I'm curious about that. And I just thought hearing things like, rustic and trashy and, typical things that cities might do, like banners. I feel like that needs to be considered. Half Moon Bay as a city, I think, we need to have that representation when you get off of Highway 1, maybe at the ground level, but not something to obstruct the sky and the sea. I think that's what everybody likes, that authenticity and purity of this town. So again, it's that balance of all those things, I think. So again, I keep coming back to what is the theme? And I was also looking at the logo, seeing the circle, the crescent, almost the circle. And seeing recently in the last year, with things that have happened in Half Moon Bay, this council is doing a lot of walking the talk in terms of bringing the community together with, unfortunately, what happened. But we're seeing murals that celebrate all the different people in this community that are struggling, trying to unify them together. I keep wondering, sorry, I'm from a brand design background as well, so this is fun for me. But, there's the plaza where we see a diverse type of people getting together. How do we maybe build on that theme, having circles in the designs? I don't know, because we're about circles. So in closing, I feel like Half Moon Bay is really walking the talk of equity and trying to build that. And we're a rare city, so again, how can that manifest in the design as you were saying? So I feel weird to be talking after you because you kind of summed up the next steps, but thank you for letting me express.
Thank you.
Good evening. Have to push the button?
It's not.
It's on.
Is it on?
It's on.
Oh, okay. Heard a lot of really good ideas tonight, and a couple of thoughts that I wanted to add is, and it pertains to something that David said and Hazel as well, is that being able to use a section of downtown for like the market when they do the on the weekends, and the idea that taking a section of Main Street and possibly closing it off. And that's something they do in San Carlos that seems to work really well. And I've seen it in other cities, but it's something you could also set up that could have just from one section to the other of that portion of Main Street, where you could drive the cars through, like on the weekdays, and have no parking on the side. So then you're able to, you're concerned about the shape of the sidewalks to the front door. So that section of Main Street, you could make it smooth and put bollards down the side so that you could use it two ways. For deliveries or somebody to drop somebody off in front of a business, they could do that and still get through. But on the weekends, you could set up the bollards and then you could use that section for your larger events. So might accomplish two things. And your guys' thoughts made me kind of think of that. So just wanted to share that.
Thank you for that.
We have one public comment right now, Mike Ferreira, and go ahead, Mike. You can speak.
Commissioners. Thank you for all your comments. I would just like to address Main Street. When I first moved here, North Main Street was not a place that you used as a shortcut between highways. You drove straight through to Highway 1 where there was a free right turn and then went northward. And in fact, there was a sign that said no right turn on red if you were on North Main and you got to Highway 1. So it was not perceived as a good place to use a shortcut. Now, Caltrans, it turns out, hates free rights. And so when we did the widening of Main Street, they got rid of the free right at Highway 92 and 1. And of course, there was no longer a prohibition on turning right on red. And if those of you that were here in this town prior to the widening of that intersection, that project, there's a whole lot more traffic on North Main than there ever was prior to that. And that's a big contributor to the problem we have with the intersection that takes you up to the high school. There's just a big, large, huge amount of traffic on that. And it never really seemed quite right to me that a city street has become part of a highway system. And it would seem to me that if we could take some of that busyness off of that street, that we might better be able to look at cures or remedies or what have you for the situation at that intersection. And it actually is not, it's important in a lot of ways. There's a big planned development district there at that intersection, and that's one of the thornier problems in dealing with it. And so some kind of traffic reduction on North Main strikes me as a really important first step to being able to make that a more aesthetically and functionally performing part of the equation. I also would like to mention that legislatures and even city councils are always behind the times when it comes to things like, big advances in electronics, et cetera. And that is our case with electric bicycles, which are really quiet motorcycles. And what we see is stuff that goes faster and faster and faster beyond what we think about. And that's what has elicited the concern of the city council. And if you're thinking about downtown and trying to make it a pleasant place, you have to give some thought, what is the city going to do about many, many more motorized bicycles than we're currently dealing with? And that's a facet that shouldn't be left to the side. And that'll be my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Is this the time to close the joint study session?
We're just going to ask one more time if there are any more public comments.
Of course.
Including our participants on Zoom, if you can raise your Zoom hand. We don't see any more. And so, yes, Acting Chair Ruddock, you are at the point of the meeting where you can close this item, and you'll be closing the session to reopen to your regular session for the next item.
Yes.
And the Architectural Advisory Committee members are invited to hang out or go home or do as they wish.
So we-
Thank you.
We close the joint study session and thank our AAC members and
Yeah, thank you.
suggest we take a 5-minute break before we reconvene the Planning Commission meeting.
Thank you.
Second.